Welcome into the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, and today I am super excited to welcome Mark Waddell to the show. Mark has a brand new book. I can pop it up on the screen. Colin gets promoted and dooms the world. This is such a fun book, especially for the time of year it is. I have to think that that was intentional. Hope so anyway. And this is how I've been thinking of like a one sentence description of Colin, which I've taken to calling it just Colin. It's, it is a workplace drama comedy with a supernatural twist. And if you have ever been in one of those soul sucking cubicle jobs, you will 100% resonate with Colin's journey and the story, and it's so much fun. I say all that to say, welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, I'm super excited to have you. Mark, I love to start with a fun question to kind of set the tone. I think that you are a Dungeons and Dragons player. Is
That's
that
right.
correct?
That's right.
What is your character of choice?
Oh, I definitely lean towards spellcasters. I'm a big fan
Okay.
of magic.
Okay.
So I'm more like a wizard slash sorcerer type, personally.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, I like
Uh,
that.
are, are you old school pen and paper, or do you embrace the new web based, tracking systems, and like what is your D&D life like?
Yeah, I go back and forth. I
Yeah.
certainly grew up playing, of course, pen and paper, but I have to say some of the online stuff, especially if you're a spellcaster, you have a lot of spells to juggle. It can be real handy to have all that stuff online. So,
Yes, absolutely. Yesterday on the show, we had R.A. Salvatore, who has written
oh
so
gosh, yeah.
many, books in the D&D realms. And I talked with him a couple of years ago when they were first trying out the web-based, and this was
Mhm.
during the COVID lockdowns. And he had a game that he ran on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. And through the
Oh
years, he would
yeah,
travel back and forth, and that allowed him to stay connected to both of his D&D groups. And
that's
so
right. That's right.
when the world was crazy and lockdown, D&D was still going on. So how about
That's
that?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Um, you also are a viola player?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I started playing violin as
Yeah,
almost all viola players do, and
sure.
I switched to viola when I was, I don't know, in high school probably.
Yeah,
And I was a big classical music nerd as a
yeah.
kid. I played in orchestras and did all that stuff. And then I went to college and I just put it down and I didn't pick it up again until I was in my 40s.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, I began playing with some community groups back in Michigan where I was living. And when we moved here to Vancouver Island, I said, hey, might as well see if there are any groups here. And so I've been playing with one for about 3 years now.
Wow. Does it just come back? After putting it down for a decade or better? Did
We did actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was sort of pleasantly surprised that it came back as quickly as it did. And playing with a community group, I love because there's all kinds of different ages and different levels of performing experience, and that's really fun.
Did do violin players and viola players develop calluses on your fingertips? Because I'm
Oh
a guitar
yes.
player, and if you
Oh
put it
yeah.
down for a while and you go to pick it back up, it will let you know.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Even after, if I say over the summer take like a month off, when I come back, I have some very painful fingertips. Yeah.
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 Most writers that I know, with few exceptions, I think, have other artistic pursuits other than writing, and it's interesting. Sometimes it's music, sometimes it's acting, directing, sometimes it's you know seamstress work. But
Yeah.
it's something. There's a creative outlet, and I've always been fascinated by how writing is connected in some way to other artistic pursuits, even if it seems like on the surface there would be no connection. I guess the question that I'm asked is, does being a musician, does it add certain tools to your writer toolbox
Hmm.
that that people might find interesting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that. Uh, but I would say probably yes. I think I now I might get this wrong, but
Yeah,
I had heard that different halves of our brain are sort of activated to do different sorts of activities, and
sure.
the half of the brain that for say playing some kind of musical instrument that involves a lot of dexterity and a lot of complex movement is different than the part of the brain that deals with, say, mathematics, or I would say even though writing is a creative endeavor,
Yeah,
it's really, of course, intellectual and mental, and so yeah, maybe there is something there that I'm sort of balancing out these sort of different creative outlets that require different skill sets,
yeah,
and but certainly music you could argue, especially orchestral music, which is what I play, is I guess really lots of music is really about storytelling, right? That there is a
yeah,
story in there, and you're just hoping to that across to your audience. So yeah, I think maybe there are some connections there.
yeah. I love it. Um, you live on Vancouver Island, is that
I
right?
do. That's right.
Yeah. What's that like this time of year?
Paradise. It's
Yeah.
paradise every day, but yeah, we are smack dab in the middle of fall, so the all the leaves are falling. It's getting a little gray,
Yeah.
but it's still you know in the 50s and 60s Fahrenheit, and yeah, it's there are still flowers blooming, so
Oh,
it's
wow.
yeah, it is a wonderful place to live.
That's pretty great. Your first book, The Body in the Back Garden, is it not set there?
It is. It's set on the island in a little fictional town. Yeah,
Nice. W what was the, first off, that was your first book published, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Was that your first book written?
I did write another fantasy novel
Yeah.
before that, and I should say I have two academic books
Okay.
that have also been published. Those are nonfiction, but no, yeah. So I did write another fantasy book, hmm, maybe around 2018, 2019, something like that.
Yeah.
And that just kind of didn't go anywhere,
As with
and
most first books.
yeah, right, right. There's quite the learning curve. Um, And but then when I left academia and moved out here in 2021, I said, I think I'm going to write a mystery novel. I've never done that before, and uh, and I did, and it kind of went from there.
I love that, and, I'm in the midst of writing a mystery novel at the
Oh
moment,
wow! Oh, fantastic!
and I have traditionally written science fiction and fantasy, but
Right,
I love mysteries. That's
I do
kind
too.
of, uh it's kind of the thing when I don't know what to read and I don't have something scheduled that I need to be reading for work
Yeah,
and things like that, I gravitate toward mysteries, and I don't know what it is. It's just it's my comfort place that,
yes,
I like characters that are a little twisted, not really twisted, a little.
yeah, yeah.
And I love a cozy mystery. Like, I don't know what that says about me, but I love it. And maybe it's when I was growing up, my mom loved Murder She Wrote and
Oh
would
yeah,
record those on VHS and like always had like a VHS loop going of Murder She Wrote.
I
And
love
and
that.
I used to tell her, I was like, well, murder mysteries, I get why you like them, but someone has to die at like in every episode, doesn't
I
that
know.
get dark?
Yeah,
And she was like, oh, you don't understand. And I didn't understand. And I was like in, 40 before I understood. Like, I don't know what it was, but so yeah, what was it about what is it about mysteries because you're obviously a fan of fantasy and
right.
you
Yeah,
tried your hand at that first and then you went mystery, which, some people would say, well, those are, diametrically opposed. And, how do you go from one to the other? Tell me about that journey from fantasy to mystery, and we'll talk about the new book in a minute. But
Sure, sure.
you're kind of pulling halfway back to fantasy with the new book, which
That's
is
true. Yeah.
anyway. Tell me about the journey.
Yeah, yeah. So for me as well, I grew up reading a lot of Agatha Christie, loved Agatha
Same,
Christie, and
yeah.
I have really, again, very similar to you, very sort of nostalgic, very comforting memories of being, a kid and even a teenager. And every Thursday night in Calgary, where I grew up, we had the we got the PBS station from Spokane,
Okay.
and every Thursday evening they had Masterpiece Mystery.
Yes.
Yes. And I think now it's just called Mystery. But uh, anyhow, that was, and I just remember for years they played, Poirot mysteries and Miss Marple. I grew up on those and I loved them. It was so comforting in, to sort of be sitting by the TV watching terrible things happen, but knowing that at the end everything's going to be okay. That
Right.
that Poirot or that Miss Marple or whomever is gonna figure it out. Uh, and uh, and so I think when I decided to try writing um, another novel and actually try and get it sold and get it published, I just really was attracted to the idea of writing a cozy mystery specifically. And this was again, this was 2021. The world was coming out of the pandemic.
We were all
Everything
looking for something cozy at that time.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be myself in a fictional seaside town where it was sort of idyllic and there were no pandemics, there were no politics or gun violence from maybe someone being murdered. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, and all of the sort of modern lights that we all have to contend with, that
Mhm.
those were magically gone, and there were still problems and still tensions, but again, I wanted to immerse myself in sort of environment. And so I just invented this town of Crescent Cove, very similar to Cabot Cove, from Murder She Wrote, uh, and and
I'll not tell anybody. Yeah.
and created this protagonist, and I had a really fun time writing that. Sort of living in that world for a few months. Yeah, and then I think I had actually been working on uh, Colin. Colin
Okay.
gets promoted and dooms the world. I think I started that back in 2018. So I started that a
Okay.
long time ago, and worked on it in fits and starts for a long time. But I kept coming back to it, even while I was revising and working on that cozy mystery. Occasionally, I would say, I just need a break. I need to just work on something else for a couple of days, and I would come back to that draft, and I would say, "Oh man, I love this." So
Yeah.
it was always there in the background.
On the surface, it feels like fantasy is more of a world building genre. You read fantasy because you want to go to a different world where
Mhm.
people are, magically abled, and the fauna and flora is magical, and all of that. Whereas mystery is more grounded. There's not necessarily so much world building in the fantasy sense that has to go on because it's the real world. Cozy fantasy, on the other hand, is like
Mm,
the idyllic version of the real world. It's almost fantasy in a way, if you
yeah,
really think about it, because it's like, the small town where you've got all the idyllic pieces of the small town, and sometimes that exists if you're lucky. A lot of times not, and the cozy fantasy is like the best representation of what a small town could be. do,
right.
do you see it
Yes.
that way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, there are cozy mysteries that are set in big cities and things
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. I have to say that's not my that's not my jam so much.
Right.
I definitely prefer the sort of small town um, idealization of that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly, as I was creating this fictional town, that for me was really fun. I got to literally map out the geography and um, come up with fun store names
Yeah.
and populate it with these characters that were, yeah, of course, because it's a small town and it's a cozy mystery. Those characters have to be a little eccentric and a little bit weird,
Yeah.
which was also really fun. And yeah, so yes, I fully agree. I think the the sort of cozy vibe, it's so often linked to these small towns, and you see it across all sorts of different genres, right? You see it in mystery, but you see it a lot in, romance novels as well. Um, and yeah, and I think that the juxtaposition of this idyllic small town and then something terrible happening
Right.
is compelling, right? That it isn't just sort of saccharine sweet and everything is perfect. It looks that way on the surface, but there's all kinds of stuff happening
Yeah.
underneath. And that I think is what is actually really compelling about it is you get both.
Yeah, if you create a perfect town and then literally drop a dead body into it, that's
Right. Yeah,
then you just stand back and watch what happens, right?
that's right. That's right.
So you uh do I get the sense that writing the body in the back garden happened pretty quickly, as opposed to Colin, which you had been writing on since 2018, I think you said? Like,
That's right.
did this story just kind of run out of you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
I literally I had just retired from academia. I was, we had moved to a new city. We didn't really know anybody.
Mhm.
And I was really desperate for some stability in terms of how I was using my time and spending my days. And so I just created this sort of daily schedule. I would go to a coffee shop where I could uh, sort of watch people and but also be alone. That's my prime sort of writing space. And I just every morning for about 5 months, I just went and I sat down and I just wrote the story. And I didn't really know what I was doing, apart from that being the sort of avid consumer of books like this. But yeah, I was this was I wasn't on Twitter. I wasn't part of any kind of writing community at that point. It
Yeah.
was just me and my laptop, and I did write it very quickly. And in about 5 months, I said, "Well, I'm gonna teach myself about querying agents," and I did, and I started querying, and it worked, and things went really quickly from there.
So in the writing community, we love to put ourselves or each other into one of two buckets, either
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
pantser who's writing by the seat of their pants and have no idea where the story's going, or the detailed plotter who has a plan for everything. I like to think that there are no people that fit firmly into one bucket or the other. We exist on a spectrum somewhere,
sure.
I
Yeah.
think. Where do you fall on that spectrum, Mark?
I'm definitely more of a pantser.
Okay.
Yes, and to my I will say to my own detriment. It is how I work best, and it feels right. But when you have things like deadlines, and you have people like editors who are saying we would love to
Right.
see this, and we would like these sorts of changes, and you go, oh, so it isn't just I can't just you know like regurgitate ideas from my head onto a screen and hand it to you. I have to then plot everything out and make it make sense. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So, um, so yes, I think I'm definitely more of a pantser, but I have had to also learn how to be a little more skillful with plotting and with um, even if it's you know even if it's after the fact where I have to go back
Yeah.
and sort of stitch everything together to make it make sense. Um, but I do think you're right. I think we tend to gravitate more towards one versus the other, but I do think to be a really to be a writer who can continuously do this, you have to be able to do both of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also tend over to the pantser side. And I was having a discussion with a friend of mine who is very much on the other side. He's a detailed planner, and he said you're thinking about the argument all wrong. He said everyone outlines. It's, are you going to outline before you write the first draft or after the first draft?
Exactly.
I
Yes.
was
Oh,
like,
I have done
I
many
don't
of those.
appreciate that
Yeah.
argument because but I have found what really works for me is the kind of roadmap metaphor of,
Yeah.
like, if I'm driving from Los Angeles to New York, there's like 15 different ways you can go. But if you mark off like 5 or 6 points along the way, so we know generally this is the direction we're going to go.
Right.
And if I have to go from Los Angeles to Utah today, I know that's where I need to end up, but a lot of magic can happen in between. And I kind of
Yeah.
have the freedom to let the story unfold, even though I know where I have to land this thing. And that really
Yes.
works for me. Do you find little tricks like that work for you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think it would take a very particular kind of person to be able to just pants everything and have no idea where it's going to end up. I bet that's probably very interesting,
Yeah.
and maybe very very liberating. But no, I certainly have really, story points. I will think often in terms of like, well, where do I want these characters to be by the midpoint, right?
Yeah.
Or what sort of turn would be really interesting or unexpected, for them. And so I do think in those terms. Um, I quite often will have written a bunch of stuff and then stop and say, I don't know how this is all going to fit together. And then I do have to take a couple days and do
Yeah.
that retroactive outlining of,
Yeah.
hey, I have all this stuff, but what is the best way in which this makes sense? And I will say, working with an editor is really amazing because, or even I assume I don't have critique partners usually, but I assume something else like that, where you have someone experienced who can sort of say like, "Oh, I'm coming at this with fresh eyes. I don't really see a story here. I don't see the plot developing as clearly as it could." And you go, "Oh yeah, no, you're right. You're right."
Yeah.
So I've definitely learned a lot over the past couple of years about the importance of doing a little more plotting and a little more planning. Uh, yeah,
Understood. So you've had Colin kind of simmering on the back burner for several years now. You decide to write the body in the back garden, and you find success with that. You land an agent, and you find a publisher, and things are going swimmingly. Is there the somewhere along the way? Is there the temptation that, okay, now I'm a fan? I'm a cozy mystery writer, and the thing that I've been thinking about all this time, that's all great, but I have a publisher now and
yeah,
I'm a cozy mystery writer.
right.
Like how do you navigate those waters?
Yeah. So basically, I was really, of course, delighted to land an agent who is amazing. And we did sell the book to a publisher. And yeah, I was like, great. I had this idea that yes, at least for now, I am happy doing this. I am happy um, staying in the genre. And I think for cozy mysteries, especially, there's huge potential for a series. You just keep, just stay in that
Oh
same
yeah.
locale, in that same town, and there's always someone who has to die, right?
Right.
And but then, unfortunately, with publishing in general, especially with traditional publishing, sometimes publishers have different ideas. And so, yeah, about 2 months before The Body in the Back Garden came out, my publisher said, "We don't want anything else from you." So they dropped me before the book even came out, and I was sort of left thinking, "Oh." hey, I guess I'm not going to be a cozy mystery author. And in fact, I thought for a while there that that was it. That this was my sort of one shot, and it didn't work. Um, and that was when I said, "Huh, what else do I have sitting on this hard drive uh, that I genuinely really love and that I would love to continue
Yeah.
working on?" And there was Colin, and I again I wrote a second cozy mystery, and it was ready to go, and they said no. So I said to my agent, who at that time I don't think had read anything in the realm of fantasy or even approaching that. I said, "Would you be interested in seeing this? I know that it's outside of your sort of expertise."
Yeah.
And she said, "Sure, absolutely. Send it to me." And I did, and she said, "I love this. It needs a lot of work." Uh, and but that was the beginning of getting that into shape. And we ended up selling Colin uh, to Penguin Random House 2 months after my Cozy Mystery came out. So it was a real roller coaster
Yeah, I'll bet.
from from June thinking maybe this isn't going to work out to October signing a deal with Penguin Random House. So yeah, uh, things there were lots of ups and downs there.
Yeah. So tell me about the genesis of Colin, because I'm fascinated with where stories are born. Because at one moment, nothing about Colin and his work adventures exist. And
Right,
then either a character walks onto the stage of your mind, or maybe you're thinking about something and this plot scenario pops in and you're like, oh, that's provocative. And then you start casting that. And then, whatever shape that takes, then in some form it does exist. And then it's your job as the writer to dig down and excavate that thing and dust it off and whip it into shape. And then a
right.
book, lives in the world. But
Yeah.
where is that moment of creation for you?
So I had a period of time around like 2017, 2018. I just had a million ideas. I was beginning to drift out of academia sort of mentally and emotionally. I just wasn't really feeling it anymore. And I was, as that happened, I was beginning to just write more fiction. And it was again
Mhm.
just brainstorming. It was just coming up with these ideas, writing a few thousand words, and then leaving it in a folder on my laptop. And
We can
I,
all relate to that, Mark.
yeah, right.
I'm the king
Uh,
of first chapters, let me tell you.
oh yeah, yeah, right. And I mean, oh, so many great ideas.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so I had an idea. I grew up reading a ton of fantasy, especially sort of epic fantasy, sword and sorcery type stuff. And at least at that point, when I was reading in the 80s and 90s, it was very the genre was pretty um, limited, right? It
Mhm.
was almost always a cast of beleaguered heroes
Mhm.
on a quest to defeat some evil.
Yeah.
Full
It wa
stop. And
it it was some version of Tolkien. I mean, let's
exactly,
be honest.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I had this idea of a story that took place. It began with these so-called heroes uh, killing this so-called evil whatever, right? Sorcerer, wizard, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, what would be the sort of end of a conventional fantasy story? But
Mhm.
what if this book started from the perspective of the apprentice to that so-called evil wizard, watching his mentor being murdered by state sanctioned so-called heroes, right? And then sort of following, so it's, turning that trope on its head and doing something
Mhm.
really interesting and asking lots of questions about like what does make someone evil, right? What does
Yeah.
that even mean, right? Who is good? Who is evil? And I had this idea, and it was sort of set in that kind of proto medieval setting.
Mhm.
And then one day I just said, what if I, set this in a more contemporary environment? And I sat down and one day I wrote this scene that was that doesn't appear in Colin, but that would be the scene that would open this story. And it was a 20 something working for this corporation called Dark Enterprises,
Right.
uh, that does a lot of really terrible things, including black magics and blood sacrifice, and he's just a the sort of nobody, someone's assistant. And in this scene, he's making coffee for a demon, and it's all very he treats it as very prosaic and very mundane. It's just part of his day-to-day job.
Yeah.
The
If
reader
anyone
hopefully
else who's ever worked in the corporate world, it's kind of like that.
yeah, well, right, exactly. It is relatable at the same time that it is absurd and
Yeah.
wild. And as soon as I wrote that scene, I said, "There is something here." Just
Mhm.
again, I wasn't planning on it, but the tone that I was able to find, it was sort of humorous and weird, and also satire, uh, and this sort of hapless protagonist. I All of that was in that first scene, and I loved it. And it was that scene that I kept coming back to for years. Every time I was writing something else or busy, and I would come back and I would look at it, I would read that first scene and I would start laughing. And I'm not that egotistical that I just crack myself up constantly, but
But
every time I
sometimes you have to be your own hype man. Let's be
sure,
honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I had sort of stumbled onto something that really appealed to me
Yeah.
personally. And every time I went back to it and cracked myself up, I said, I have to keep working on this because this one scene is my sort of entryway into this whole strange world that all of a sudden is living in my head.
Yeah.
And that is what happened. And even though that scene isn't in the book, that was the beginning of this whole story.
So that brings up a great um uh topic that we talk a lot about in writing, and that's theme. And some writers will say, well, I began the story because I had this theme that I wanted to explore, and I wanted this to be my treatise on, corporate greed and all of that. Okay, that's wonderful. That's great. But for me, I can only speak to the things I've experienced. A lot of times, I'll write something and then read back over it and then realize the theme, and it was
Mm,
nothing that I set out to do. And when I first saw your book, I was like, well, this is a great satire of like corporate greed and like the nth degree to how we push things. And I love that it just started as a fantasy story that morphed into this thing. And
yeah.
you know uh, were you like, how aware were you of what the story was becoming, as
Mm.
far as, like, theme-wise, topic-wise, or was this just a fun thing to poke fun at, and then it started emerging, or was there a point where you're like, "Okay, I see a vein here, and I'm gonna go for it. I'm just gonna double down."
Yeah, so even though this book is set in and around a sort of corporate environment, I've never worked in the corporate world. So this is all for me, purely imagined or based on other representations of
Yeah,
kind of corporate life, right? And so there was no sort of personal stake in, like, I've experienced this myself and I'm going to
yeah,
satirize my experiences. It, I realized as I was working on it that yes, there was a vein underneath it of uh, almost, I don't know how to put this, but a sort of like anti-capitalist rage of just, I was at the time when I was writing this or beginning to write it, I was a professor. My whole job was teaching young people how to look at the world differently, and how to look past the stories that we are conditioned to believe, by everyone around us, right? And to instead really ask critical questions about, but okay, these people or these companies or these governments say, what's really happening and what's motivating them to say that. And so I was coming at it with this attitude of, you know it's trying to juxtapose the sort of happy, smiley corporate family
Hmm.
uh, crap, right? Of that narrative that is everywhere. It's in all the marketing, all the advertising. We just want to make your life better. We want to keep your kids healthy. We want to do this for you and that for you. And the reality, right? Which is we're really just in this for the money. And we don't give a crap about you or your
Yeah.
kids or anything, right? Except making a profit. And that was not my original intention when I was writing this, but I think setting it in this company, a lot of that just kinda came out.
Yeah.
And it is definitely this sort of underlying, um, theme that is running throughout it, and it's also connected with these questions I had going in about the nature of evil, the nature of culpability. Um, is someone culpable simply because they work for a company that does terrible things? That was a question that I continue to wrestle with, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of companies out there that do a lot of bad things. There's a lot of people who work for them who just are there because they need a paycheck. They just need to
Sure.
support themselves and feed their family.
Right.
Um, but should we hold them morally responsible? And I mean, I have no answer for that.
Yeah.
I don't think there is any one answer necessarily. But that was a question that was really at the forefront of my mind as I was writing the character of Colin, who is genuinely not a nice person, for at least part of the novel, right?
Right.
He is our hero, he is our protagonist, but he is deeply morally gray. Um, and in part, that's because of the environment that he exists in, right?
Right.
And so it was those sorts of questions that really motivated me originally. But yes, there did end up being this much more satirical, hard-edged sort of um, commentary on
Yeah.
capitalism and on corporatism.
Well, and satire is so interesting because it allows you to uh, illustrate the absurd by being absurd,
Right,
and to really explore themes of like nature versus nurture. Is Colin this way because he genuinely is a bad person? Is he in a bad situation, which brings out does it manifest in bad behavior like
right.
like who is Colin and what is Colin's environment doing to him is a really interesting thing to explore. And when you sprinkle a little humor in there, wry or otherwise,
Yeah.
you can get away with really pushing
Really pushing
boundaries.
back. I think that's true, and I think that is a really good point about, and that is really what satire seeks to do is
Hmm.
to to question power, right? And to speak truth to power and to really hold it up to scrutiny as well as to ridicule,
Yeah.
and or through ridicule. And yeah, I writing Colin for me was pretty personal. I don't think I'm someone who would necessarily be okay with the world ending or work for a company that does terrible things.
Yeah.
But I could understand. I wrote Colin as someone that I personally could understand and that I could relate to. He is, he's been bullied his whole life. He feels powerless, as so many of us do, at various points. And then this question of, well, what would you do, right? If and I want readers to really wrestle with that question.
Yeah.
And I will say the reaction that I've gotten so far is a lot of people do relate to Colin and can understand where he's coming from and even empathize with him to a degree. But there are people who really don't like him because he does terrible things or he is okay with terrible things.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
and I think that's a great point that you illustrate there. That people that are not writers often want to know, are you writing yourself? Like, is Colin Mark Waddell? And you're like, well, of course not. But can I empathize with Colin? Can I understand where he's coming from, maybe the circumstances that allowed him to get to this point. And that's really the writer's job, is not to be Colin, but to try to understand Colin.
Right. Yes, and then try and somehow take this fictional person that lives in your brain and make that person relatable to a total stranger out there, right?
Right.
Like that's quite a task.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think really good writers who I personally really adore, are able to do that with even the most complicated uh, and potentially unlikable characters, right? I don't think people are born inherently bad. I don't think they're born unlikable. They learn to present themselves that way because of what's happened to them. And I think the more we can at least try to empathize with that and to understand it, doesn't mean we have to accept it, doesn't mean we have to say that we're okay with it or that that's
Right.
okay. Right. But the more that we can at least make the effort to say, okay, so you've had these sorts of experiences, it makes sense that this is your reaction or that this is what you would then choose to do. I think it is very human. And I do also think that we're all a little morally gray. As much as most of us try to do the right thing consistently, sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
And that's, again, the nature of being human. So I personally really respond to characters who are not always the so-called hero or the so-called good person, where there is more going on that is objectionable, that makes you stop and maybe, shout at your Kindle or shout at the book, what are you doing? Stop this. This is
Stop.
terrible. Yeah. But that you keep reading because it's like, oh yeah, okay, okay, right. I'm invested in this character story and I see where they're coming from. Even if I don't agree with it, I want to know how this turns out.
Yeah. Yeah. If we know anything about the publishing industry, Colin Gets Promoted and Dooms the World has probably been off your desk for a while as it goes through the the machinations of publishing. What are you working on these days?
So I do have another book set in the same universe. It's not a
I was
direct
hope
sequel.
was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah, yeah. So I have another book that's set in Dark Enterprises in the same company. It's set in a different city, but
Yeah.
and with different characters. But I love this world
Yeah.
that I somehow created, and so I do have another book that is set in that world. It's I think expected to come out next fall, so in about a year, hopefully. So I am deep in the weeds on some editing on that right now.
Love it. Love it. Well, Colin Gets Promoted and Doom's the World is available everywhere now. It came out about a week ago. Go pick it up at your local bookstore. It's available everywhere. If you don't have a great local bookstore, we'll put links to it in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon. Um, the Audible audiobook, have you had a chance to listen to it? And what do you
Yes.
feel about your work being translated in audiobook format?
Yeah, it's such a surreal experience to hear someone else reading your
Yeah.
words out loud.
Right,
Uh,
because the up until then, the only way you've heard it is in your head, right?
that's right. That's right. But we were really fortunate. We have Pete Cross, who is the narrator for this, and he captures the tone of the book and especially Colin's tone. He just captures it so perfectly. So that has been a real delight for me is listening to that.
Perfect, perfect. I haven't listened to the audiobook yet. I read, the arc that your publisher sent me,
Yep.
and I'm really excited to grab the audiobook and,
Oh yeah, you should.
maybe I'll get into it this weekend.
There you
Uh,
go.
Mark, this has been so much fun chatting. If people are just discovering you and wanna follow along for upcoming news and dig into everything you've got going on, is there a good place to follow you online?
Yeah, so my author website is Mark Waddell Books.
Okay.
and there's information there about my books, and you can sign up there for my newsletter, which I try and get out every month or so with some updates and some news. And the social media I'm most active on, which is not much, but it's still something, is on Instagram, and
because
I
that's
am
where the
there.
good vibes are.
That's right, and I am there as Mark Waddell, author.
Perfect. Perfect. We'll link those up as well to make it easier for folks to find you.
All right,
Mark,
thank you.
love the book. Love what you're doing. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you, Hank. This was super fun.